On today's episode, we're going to talk about thyroid health. So we're going to talk about how to boost the thyroid's metabolism in many ways, but one of those is a unique form of exercise. And I have with us today Dr. Dennis Wilson. And Dr. Dennis Wilson, I first met quite a number of years ago at a restorative health conference, a restorative medicine conference. And he was teaching a class, a certification actually, in T3 and using T3 therapy as opposed to the standard, allopathic medicine approach, which he was trained in to help people with thyroid function. And I met him there. We got to chatting. I ended up having him come in and talk to our group. And we've had a, back and forth relationship since then. And I am excited to share some new stuff that he's been working on. So he identified Wilson's temperature syndrome and its treatment 30 years ago, which involves having symptoms of slow metabolism, having symptoms of altered thyroid function, but the lab tests all look pretty good, right? And so, and they don't respond to the conventional T4 therapy. And it's completely reversed using, diet, exercise, and a lot more than that. And so we're going to talk today about a unique form of exercise that he developed. And we've got also with us his daughter, Allison. And she was like the first guinea pig on this specific form of exercise that has been found to uniquely shift thyroid function. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. It's an honor being here with you today.
Well, I'm super excited to have you here because I know you're very comfortable with teaching health and wellness practitioners because that's what you've been doing in teaching the Wilson's temperature syndrome certification for how many years? Like 10 years now? I think I took it like 8 years ago.
Yeah. And more. I think it's more than that.
More than that. So a long time. Yeah, I think it's great. And so, we can go into a little bit about how you got interested in that because you were trained in medical school where you learned to test the TSH. If it's high, put them on T4. Done, right? And we don't look at anything. Everybody else is a hypochondriac or they're depressed or they get medication for constipation. But other than that, so how did you see that maybe that wasn't working so well and develop your own approach?
Well, there's, I had a lot of patients, a lot of doctors do. We have, almost every doctor has patients that have these classic symptoms of hypothyroidism. They have fatigue, depression, dry skin, dry hair, easy weight gain, fluid retention, itchiness, hair loss, losing the lateral third of their eyebrows, cold and heat intolerance, and dozens more symptoms just like that are classic for a slow metabolism. And the most vexing, perhaps, the one that probably drives more patients to the doctor or the practitioner more than anything else is the weight gain. They know that there's something wrong because they were going along fine, and all of a sudden they started to put on weight inexplicably, and they're thinking, what in the world is going on here? But if you ask them, a lot of times their symptoms came on about the same time they went through some major stress. So they get the symptoms and the weight, and they'll gain a bunch of weight. And so the doctor will say, oh my gosh, I'm sure you have a thyroid problem because that's classic hypothyroidism. And we all get the tests. And then to our amazement, the tests come back normal. And so then it's then you have two choices to think at that point. You could say, well, I guess it's not thyroid, because what I was taught in medical school says that if the test is normal, then it can't be a metabolism problem, because we've been trained as doctors to measure metabolism with blood tests. And I found out later, since then, I see that doesn't even make sense. Because blood tests don't measure metabolism. They don't measure body temperature, and they don't measure CO2 production. They don't measure O2 consumption, which are all the scientific hallmarks of metabolic rate. I mean, a blood test doesn't measure any of that. But we've been trained to think, that measures metabolism. So anyway, you had two choices at that point. You could say, well, this isn't metabolism, or you could say, oh, well, I guess that maybe the blood tests don't measure metabolic rate. And it turns out that I'm more in that school of thought. And I found different ways to get the temperature up, and I've always been amazed at how readily patients' symptoms improve when their temperatures are normalized, or in other words, when their metabolic rate is normalized. And it's really amazing to think that you can change somebody's body temperature. You can regulate their metabolic rate the way you would change the temperature on a thermostat in your house. I mean, you can change it.
Yeah.
And most people, don't realize that that's a possibility.
Wow, that's awesome. So you're discovering that all these people have thyroid symptoms and they're not showing up on normal testing that you've taught, and you and all the other hundreds of thousands of medical doctors have been taught. And there's so many of these people that are falling through the cracks, right? That they're just so, well, oh, here's some Prozac, here's some Mela, whatever their symptoms are, and they're not getting better. And so you decided to look at temperature, which totally makes sense, right? Like metabolic rate, temperature. And when you did that, I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What did you find when you started to measure people's temperature?
I found that the temperatures correlate exactly with their symptoms, and so much so that it dawned on me. I've become absolutely 110% convinced that your body temperature is a direct measure of your metabolic rate, which is really obvious. It's really obvious when we think about it, because the faster your metabolism, the more ATP you utilize, and the more energy is released, and the higher your temperature is. And it's really interesting because really we call them hypothyroid symptoms, but what they really are is low temperature symptoms. They're low temperature symptoms. They're symptoms of a slow metabolism. So then you have a thyroid problem. If you have a thyroid problem, that can lead to low temperatures. And if you have low temperatures, then you can have symptoms of low temperatures. So really, hypothyroid symptoms are really low temperature symptoms due to an inadequate supply of thyroid hormone. But see, you can have an adequate supply of hypothyroid hormone and still have low temperatures. And if you have those low temperatures, you can still have low temperature symptoms.
So if you can have, what causes that? So if you have normal amounts of thyroid, say the thyroid gland is perfectly functioning, it's putting out the right amount of T4, it's not diseased, it doesn't have nodules, no cancer. How then can we have how can we have this happening?
Well, I've come to believe that it's not necessarily, I believe it's part of a survival mechanism. I believe that there's our body's main mandate is survival. And so when you're threatened with extinction, or, there's two ways, one of the biggest ways you can die, like from a survival standpoint, is by starving to death. So like if your metabolism is slowing down because you're getting threatened to the idea, like your existence is being threatened. That's almost like your food supply being threatened. So now there's two ways you can manage that. Like if you were the body, you could say, oh my gosh, we're running out of food. We might run out of food. So there's two choices. We can either make ourselves stronger so we can better obtain food, or we're going to have to slow down and conserve what we have. So it's just like how people manage their finances. There's two approaches. You can say, well, we're really going to have to reduce our expenses because tough times are coming. Or you can say, wow, we're going to have to get our better income. We're going to have to get more money. And so there's two approaches. And so this approach with this low temperature, I think, is more the conservative approach the body takes, and just says, wow, things are pretty tough right now, pretty scary. So we better just, slow down and not use so many of our resources, and so then your metabolism slows down, your temperature slows down, and that's fine. But that's only one way of doing it, and the opposite we'll talk about later is this idea of you can call it conservation mode versus productivity mode, but we also like to call it storage mode versus forage mode. So you can strengthen your, so like either you're going to forage for more food or you're just going to hunker down and store food. So like by doing this certain kind of exercise, you can promote your body, you can signal your body to understand that, hey, we're not doing storage mode, we're doing forage mode. We're going to strengthen ourselves so that we can go climb that coconut tree, so we can go, hunt down that pig and plant those fields or whatever it is.
Wow. So I like this concept of storage versus forage. That's really unique. Nobody else is really talking about that. But stepping back one more backwards to go forwards, so I want to hear more about how we're going to increase a person's metabolism. There's two questions that I have. One is, when we, what's the first question? So when someone is slowing down, right? So there's threat, whether it's mental, emotional threat, whether in the olden days it was animals chasing us, whether it was not enough food. We don't see that a lot in our society because food is around 24/7. We actually see the opposite. And I want to talk in a moment about how that can affect the metabolic rate. But when we look at the conventional medical approach, right? So we go, oh, well, TSH is high, so let's give person more T4. So where they're in this conservation mode, and we give them more T4. How does that affect it short term? But then what does that do long term to that person's ability to maintain healthy metabolism?
Well, that's an excellent question. And I when I'm managing patients or consulting with doctors who are managing patients, I encourage them not to use T4 in patients who have normal thyroid blood tests and they still have low body temperatures. So, I mean, there are some people that have hypothyroidism, they don't make enough T4, and in that case, then T4 is not the worst choice, at least in the beginning. But even then, if I had a hypothyroid patient, whether they're hypothyroid or whether they have Wilson's temperature syndrome, in other words, whether their TSH is high or whether it's normal, in either case, I personally wouldn't recommend giving them any T4 until their temperature's normal. And so T4 is a great hormone to use if, like you say, the body can utilize it. But a lot of times when people are in storage mode, when their metabolism is slowing down and they're in conservation mode, one of the ways they slow down is they reduce the conversion of T4 into T3. Their body doesn't convert T4 into T3 as much as it could. And so your body's already not converting T4. And T4 is interesting because it can actually compete with T3 at the level of the cell. So, when we give somebody T4, we're thinking, oh, the more T4, the more T3. That might be true depending how well they're converting it. But the T4 you're giving itself could compete with what T3 they do have in their system. So there's some people, the classic story is that a person's going along and then you give them some T4 and they get better for like 2 to 3 months and then they get worse again. And I know there's practitioners on this podcast that will recognize this story. And so then you give them more T4 and they'll get better for 2 or 3 months, and then they'll get worse again. And then you increase the T4 and they get better and they get worse again until finally you give them T4 and instead of getting any better, they get worse right off the bat. And that's what I call pushing somebody too far in the wrong direction with the wrong medicine. And it's a really hard thing to explain to a patient because then at that moment they lose all hope because they saw their only hope was T4. And now even the T4 is not working in the API. So anyway, Yeah. So what we do is we give T3 to patients until their temperature's normal. And when their temperature's normal, that's a sign of forage mode. That's a sign of, you know, their metabolic rate being reset, the metabolism being reset to the point that they shouldn't have so much trouble converting T4 into T3, because you've kind of taken them out of this this mode where they're just conserve, and you've gotten them more into like productivity, more of forage, and more of a better metabolism, better uh, uh, pathway. And then we go with that. And then later on, you can add T4, and sometimes that's helpful. But yeah.
So I'm thinking, back to what you just said about the T4, and it gets better than worse, better than worse, and then stabilizes. Do you have a sense of what that mechanism is that's causing that to happen?
I do. It's not necessarily going to show up on blood tests, but my feeling is that, see, all this conversion of T4 to T3 happens inside the cells. It doesn't happen it's so much in the bloodstream. This is something that happens intracellular. You can't necessarily see it. But just logically, we understand that T4 is converted to T3, and it's also converted into something called reverse T3, which is completely inactive. So if your body is trying to slow itself down and trying to, meet the effect of T4, it will use less. It will convert less into T3 and more into reverse T3. T3 being active, reverse T3 being inactive. But on top of that, reverse T3 also is so similar. Reverse T3 and T3 are the exact same molecule. They have like 30 different atoms, and those 30 atoms are exactly the same, and they're exactly the same. Only, reverse T3 has 3 iodine atoms, and T3 has 3 iodine atoms. The only difference is where those iodine atoms are placed in the active site of the hormone. And so what I'm saying is, even though T3 can occupy the receptor site for reverse T3 can occupy the receptor site and can competitively inhibit T3. That's my belief, and I believe but anyway, so what I think is happening is you're building up, like when you just get more and more T3, you're just building up kind of like, and this is instantaneous. I mean, it's happening in real time, but it's kind of like you just have so much reverse T3 clouding or impinging or obstructing the T3 that you're not really converting any more of that T4 into T3. You're just converting it into reverse T3, and then you're blocking what little T3 you're making. So
I would say, based on my understanding of thyroid physiology and anatomy and biochemistry, that's exactly the conclusion that I come to, right? And that's why it doesn't really work long term to just give people T4 if we're not looking at why this is happening. We're also not looking at why is the body not, if we aren't making enough, why is the body not making enough T4? Is it some nutrient deficiency? Is it some toxicity? Is it some stress? Like, what is that? Is it antibodies, which probably in 90% of people, it's some sort of autoimmune attack. But we don't look at that in conventional medicine. I don't mean we, you, and I, or the people listening here necessarily, but I mean in conventional medicine, it's just not taught to do that. Why look at antibodies when we don't have any other approach other than give T4, right? So just let's give the T4. I just want to ask, in your experience, you've had a lot of experience with giving T3. Do you find that there's like the conversion slows down when we're actually supplying it, or the production of thyroid? Like, is there a reverse inhibition, like an inhibited kind of a thing that happens?
Yeah, the way I look at it is that when you use T3, you're expecting the TSH to go down, and sometimes even to undetectable levels. You expect the reverse T3 to go down, and that's really what you're after. Like if the T4 and reverse T3 is impairing T4 to T3 conversion, I'm happy to get rid of all that T4 and reverse T3, because I'm trying to get T4 to T3 production to come, or conversion to be repaired and to get back to normal. And so it might be really unsettling for some doctors to use T3 and see the TSH go to undetectable, or to see the reverse T3 plummet to 0 or something like that. But in my experience, it's been fine doing that. And it's really, and sometimes it's necessary to get somebody to back to normal too. And the idea of T3 therapy is to normalize their temperature enough to wean them off the medicine so they don't have to take it for life. That's a big difference between the conventional thought of T4 medicine where you take it for life. We're not talking about that. We're talking about using T3 for 2 to 3 months to reboot their thyroid system. And when I say reboot, I mean just like with a computer, you turn their thyroid system down and you let all the pathways get cleaned out, and then you let their thyroid pathways come back up. But they come back up in a clean environment, and they have every opportunity to function normally again, just like on your computer. When your computer gets all bogged down with extraneous programs that are weirding out, and then you turn it off, and then all your operating system code comes back online upon line, and it works fine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that analogy. I also, think that at the same time, and you're a big fan of this, we're looking at the environment, we're looking at the diet, we're looking at the stressors, because if we don't clean those things up, we can reboot the system, but the same thing on a computer, you go and do all the sloppy stuff again, it gets bogged down again. So has that been your experience as well? So what is some of the things you do in that realm? And that's to lead us right into the exercises part of that. So there's a little delay in here.
So absolutely, you want to decrease the stress, and you want to do everything that everybody knows they should. They should eat well. They should have high nutrient food. They should have plenty of vegetables. Have plenty of nutrition. They should have great nutrition. They should have wonderful sleep. They should have a positive outlook. They should get plenty of activity. And we'll talk about what can be done about activity. But in my experience, there's some things about activity. It's just like this. It's just like there is no adequate substitute for good food or good nutrition. There's no adequate substitute for good nutrition. You have to have good nutrition because that's what your body runs on. And then it's like there's no adequate substitute for good sleep when you are sleep deficient. And likewise, there's no adequate substitute for effective physical activity. And you can take all the medicines and drugs, and there's no adequate substitute for a positive mental outlook or a healthy mental or psychological framework. So anyway, it's just like, you can do, if you leave out one of these things, then you can have problems. And one of the things we're leaving out a lot is physical activity. I think that if you ask the average adult, when's the last time they can't talk, out of breath, winded? They got so winded from exercise that they can't talk. When's the last time they did that? It might be decades. So. Yeah.
So I want to talk about that and how you came to see the value of this and the exercise system that I was introduced to you probably 3 or 4 years ago. It's called Fastercise, which I love, right? And so I would love for you to explain, how does that affect the thyroid? How does it affect metabolic rate? And you mentioned earlier about mitochondrial function, which we all need to have good mitochondrial function in order to make good energy. So I want to hear about that, and then how do people do it?
All right. Well, I kind of started on this because I was actually given an invitation to give a talk on at a medical convention, a naturopathic medical convention, and they were saying, we've heard about your thyroid, but we'd be interested in if you could give us a talk on some other subject. And I'm like, okay. how about innovative approaches to fat loss? And it's something I was interested in, but, and they're sort of like, oh yeah, that would be great. But so anyway, I had to come up with a talk for innovative approaches to fat loss, and I didn't have a talk for innovative approaches to fat loss. So anyway, I went to the I took an interest in it, and I spent so much time. I spent a year and a half studying, and I was fascinated by what I saw, because there's things in the literature now that in the last 10 years that weren't available 30 years when I started working about Wilson's temperature syndrome, that they didn't have that. Like, there was stuff on high intensity exercise and intermittent fasting and even basic science and mitochondria and T3 and actin and myosin and physiology of the muscles and so on and so forth. Anyway, so as I started studying that, I was like, because there's a lot of doctors, even when they get their temperature to normal, there's some get their patients' temperature to normal. Sometimes their patients will lose 100 pounds. Sometimes they'll lose 30 pounds. Sometimes they'll lose all the weight they need. But sometimes they still have trouble with their weight. And I've seen that before. And I was like, what's wrong with this picture? There's got to be an answer. There's got to be a solution, because, we're seeing more obesity of the world. And yet there's some people who are completely fat. They don't have any fat. So there's got to be. So anyway, I started researching that, and I saw so many different tie-ins from every different direction and every different, cardiology and psychology and so many different aspects. And they all pointed to this one simple solution, and it just evolved, and I couldn't believe it. But yeah, one of the things I found out is that mitochondria have T3 receptors on them. I mean, one of the things that the way T3 works is T3 has, everybody knows that there's T3 receptors in the nucleus of the cell. And the way T3 even works to speed up the metabolism is it goes into the nucleus and it increases the DNA transcription to increase the production of all kinds of proteins, not the least of which mitochondrial parts and components. And so then T3 increases the size and number of mitochondria. And not only does it increase the biosynthesis of mitochondria, but T3 stimulates the mitochondria have T3 receptors. Anyway, there's I realized that almost all of the ATP in our body comes from mitochondria. And our fat, our protein, our carbohydrate are all metabolized in the mitochondria to make T3. To make ATP, or to lead to the production of ATP. And anyway, so it's just like, wow. And it turns out that perhaps one of the biggest functions and purposes of one of the biggest ways, I'm sorry, I just have to throw this in here. Do you know that in some animals, thyroid hormone doesn't even affect the metabolism? It doesn't have anything to do with the metabolism. Thyroid hormone doesn't have anything to do with the metabolism.
In mammals or other?
In other creatures. I think it might be plants. I don't know if it's mammals, but anyway, not in every animal does thyroid hormone affect metabolism, but it does in humans. So it may be that one of the most important, perhaps the most important way that T3 increases the metabolic rate is by increasing the size of the mitochondria, the size and number of mitochondria, the biosynthesis of mitochondria. That might be one of the biggest ways. Well, it turns out that there's something else that increases the size and number of mitochondria dramatically, and that's lactate. And it makes sense, but lactate is the production of is the product of glycolysis, and glycolysis ramps up when oxidative phosphorylation in the mitochondria is overwhelmed. Like when your oxidative pathways are overwhelmed, you have to revert to this anaerobic pathways. You have to revert to glycolysis. And when you are using that much when you're using that much ATP, then you overwhelm your mitochondria. You build up acid in your muscles. And when you build up acid in your muscles, you start breathing faster because one of the ways your body has of getting rid of acid is by blowing off CO2. And so perhaps the best measure of how fast you're burning calories is how fast you're breathing. The faster you're breathing, the faster you're burning calories. And the faster you're producing lactate, the faster you're generating lactate. And so basically it's like your body's saying, oh my gosh, Rita Marie, what are you doing with using up all this power? You're using up so much power and you have just completely overwhelmed your mitochondria. So we're going to have to make more mitochondria tomorrow. So it's like your body just gets like exclamation points all over the place saying, hey, Rita Marie needs like 2 or 3 times more mitochondria than she had today because she's like really using up a lot of power. And so talk about productivity mode, talk about forage mode. So it's just like, oh my gosh, Rita Marie isn't sitting around, conserving energy. She's out there climbing a coconut tree. She's out there, doing whatever it takes to get her next meal. So, we need to generate some more mitochondria so she can catch that rabbit, or so she can crack that coconut and get the food she's after.
So it's interesting, right? Because this is something that as we get older, like I've heard the numbers, and forgive me if I don't get the numbers exactly right, but for every decade in age, we're losing like 10% of the numbers of mitochondria. So mitochondrial biosynthesis goes down as we age. So it becomes even more important as we age to overwhelm. Now, some people might be thinking, but I have these people who are couch potatoes, and how am I going to get them to even get their breathing rate up like that? So let's talk, and how frequently. It sounds like every day we should be doing something to increase that. So every day the mitochondria are going, okay, let's do more. Kind of like if we want strong muscles, we exercise on a regular basis to increase the strength. Same thing is true like with this lactate threshold.
Exactly. So Allison, what would you say to people who are, have people that don't want to exercise or feel like they can't exercise?
I'll just say, thank goodness it only takes 5 minutes a day. With
5 minutes a day, he can do.
5 minutes a day is totally doable. And we can talk more about this in a second, but Fastercise is the exercise that we've been alluding to, and something that is also my dad's innovation. And the great thing about Fastercise is that you can get that out of breath, totally winded experience just without even changing your clothes. You can do it sitting down or standing up, and it all comes down to doing voluntary shivering. You don't have to be cold. You don't have to do a cold plunge. And it's also very gentle on your joints. People who have rheumatoid arthritis or bad backs, bad knees, they can do Fastercise without risking injury. So I'd say it's one of the most effective ways to exercise, especially if you have any kind of schedule limitations or health limitations.
Yeah, so I want to hear more about this, but I can't shiver. I have a hard time, and I've still been trying to shiver when I'm not cold. I can shiver like crazy when I'm cold, and I get cold easily, but I did the cold thing twice in one day, jumped into the cold pool after the hot tub, lasted less than 20 seconds, and got out. And I'm like, I'm not doing that every day.
I wouldn't either.
But I have friends who do it every day. I mean, they literally put ice cubes in their bathtub, and they do it. So how do we do it without that discomfort is what most people want to hear. And then I want a description that we can do to let people see. And we can actually, on the show notes page, if you can give us some sort of little 1-minute video clip that people, or a link to that people can click to see it. I want to hear more about this because I heard you speak about this years ago, and I try it and I go, but that's not it. That's not it. I'm moving too big. I got to get, and I just don't feel like I do it right. So,
yeah, of course. So let's talk about how to do voluntary shivering. So you hit it right on the nose when you're talking about like movements are really small. So you can just imagine, what do I do when I shiver? Well, you tense your muscles up. A lot of us don't realize that, but when you're cold, you kind of tense up and you want to kind of hunker down.
Yeah.
So tense your muscles first is a very important piece to being able to shiver. And then you also do really tiny movements, only an inch or two in either direction, right? And so, for those of us who would like to follow along, I'll just do our most basic exercise. And so it involves you stand up and you kind of act like you're jogging in place. But instead of lifting your whole foot off the floor, you just lift your heel off the floor. And so you're kind of bending your heel off the floor. So you're just going to shape, with lifting your heels off the floor, you're going to kind of bend your legs back and forth, just a couple inches in either direction. Same thing with your arms. You can kind of have them down at your side. And you're just going to shiver those back and forth as well. And then to be able to get like really out of breath, winded, you're going to do what we mentioned, tense your muscles and then shake as fast as you can. And for those of you who are watching a video, you can see I'm actually like, my fists actually blur a little bit when I'm shaking as fast as I can. And then you just do that as fast as you can for 1 minute. Now I'll just demonstrate this for like 10 seconds so that you guys can kind of see and hear what it looks like when you do it to maximum intensity. So you shiver like this, and you can actually see that my face is shaking a little bit. And just in a few seconds, I start to feel kind of out of breath. Ooh, okay. So I will say too, I have done Fastercise for a few years now. So if you can't get to that intensity right off the bat, that's okay. Sometimes it takes a little practice, but you will be surprised as you combine this tensing your muscles, shaking them as fast as you can, and you do that for 1 minute, you will be really surprised just how tired you get, how winded you get. It'll feel kind of like you just sprinted 100 yards. And this is how I entered my bodybuilding competition. I think we were going to mention that at some point, but 10 minutes of Fastercise a day was how I prepared for my bodybuilding competition. So I'm Dr. Wilson's daughter, been a huge fan of him for a long time, since I was born. So but I had a baby, and I had gains like about 35 pounds with my pregnancy. And Dad kind of solidified his ideas around this whole Fastercise program within like right when I was about to give birth. Within 2 weeks before I gave birth to my baby, he's like, you could try this if you want to lose some weight. And I said, absolutely, I'd love to, because I was really busy. I just started working, had a newborn, moving across the country, trying to buy a house. Like, I just didn't have a lot of spare time. And so I gave this a try, ended up losing 45 pounds and entered a bodybuilding competition just doing Fastercise. Now, that wasn't the plan from the beginning. All I wanted to do was lose my extra baby weight, but the baby weight melted immediately. I lost it all in about 3 months, which I was thrilled. And then with the physique that I was starting to get, I was like, what can I do with this? Like, let's get creative here. And then I thought, why not try a bodybuilding competition? Which again, that was like super far outside of my comfort zone. Kudos to people who enjoy that, but like, it is very, like, you get super low body fat percentage. I got down to like 11% body fat. And, but anyway, it was incredible. Like, backstage, I think this is what really hit it home for me, because I was backstage with the other competitors and we were talking about, the preparation, and they were all saying like, my husband just doesn't get it. I'm in the gym like 2 or 3 hours a day and he just thinks that's so much time. And I agree, that is a lot of time. And they were just, and then I also noticed their hands. They had huge calluses on their hands, from all the weight that they've lifted. And like, I'm over here, Miss Baby Hands, because I haven't been lifting any weights. And I noticed a couple of them when we high-fived, they're like, what is going on? And then I was thinking to myself, I didn't talk about this because you don't want to be a brat, but I was thinking to myself, like, I've literally spent like 10 minutes a day preparing for this. And like, to get to a similar level of physique with people who trained like 2 or 3 hours and you only train 10 minutes, that seems kind of like a steal of a deal, It just seems kind of amazing. And
Yeah.
I think that's when I realized, like, this is something that a lot of people would benefit from. And I want to help a lot of people incorporate Fastercise because the science behind it allows you to get these extraordinary results in just a few minutes. So that's my story.
Wow. So here's the thing, you guys who are listening who are health practitioners, how many times you get, I don't have time to exercise. I have a bad knee, my shoulder injury. There's no way I have to be careful. I can't do hard stuff because of my heart or whatever other things we hear. So the one thing that came to me, I was shocked in how long that breathlessness, you only did it for 10 seconds. And that breathlessness lasted a couple of minutes into your talk there. So it's clearly effective. And I did it the same time you did, and I didn't do it properly because I didn't get breathless. So I got to practice. I'm going to keep watching you. So, but the thing is that, yes, everybody can afford 5 minutes a day. I want to know what you did with the other 10 minutes because I want to enter a bodybuilding contest. I would like that physique. We'll post her picture, her before and after at 9 months pregnant. And then 9 months later, there she is, gorgeous. And you were not like that before, right? You didn't have this bodybuilding physique before pregnancy. You're just like a normal person.
I've never done a bodybuilding competition before the one that I did with Fastercise. And I had not religiously worked out for the previous 4 years leading up to that. So yeah.
Wow. So it's very encouraging for us as practitioners to know all these people who were struggling to get their metabolism up. They're struggling to lose weight like that. The weight melted off. I love that. And you didn't you couldn't have done severe dieting because you were nursing a baby, right? You couldn't have gone on some calorie restriction type thing it was.
No.
Yeah.
We don't really recommend extreme calorie restrictions, and I didn't even count calories. I didn't count macros either. I tried to restrict refined starches and sugars like pastas and breads and teas and stuff like that. And then I tried to do pretty much, and just ate until my hunger went away, and then tried to push my hunger off with exercise. And this is one thing that Dad hasn't mentioned yet, but this shivering exercise, 1 minute of shivering can push your hunger off for up to 2 hours because it releases so much stored fuel from your body in the form of carbohydrates and fat that it causes your hunger to go away because it's been satisfied. And that's one of the ways that it's so easy to lose weight with Fastercise because it replaces the need to eat more frequently by feeding off of your stored body fat. And so I think that's another way that it makes it easy if people are trying to lose weight. It's a nice way to manage your appetite. And so you're not going around hungry all the time in a calorie deficit, just, I wish I could have a cracker. It's not like that as much as, I've satisfied my hunger with exercise. Now I'm going to get on with my day.
Now you're going to get on with it. So you spend less time eating. It helps you to do more of the intermittent fasting type 6 hours between meals or whatever. And you get to do that without that discomfort of it, right? So you get the benefits of intermittent fasting, which are, lowered glucose and lowered insulin levels and improved hemoglobin A1C and just overall better metabolism. You get the increased mitochondrial synthesis, which is huge, right? And that helps you uptake T3. And it's not just about your overall metabolism, like how many calories you burn. But when you do that, you increase the efficiency of the organs and the glands because now they're effectively doing their job, right? Instead of being deprived. And you're helping your body to burn more calories, right? You're just overall, it sounds like a really good deal for 5 minutes a day.
Absolutely. And I would add one more really big distinction, and that is that when you're doing Fastercise, you're going without food. When you go without food and you're starving, when you're starving and you're just going hungry, a hallmark of that is your body temperature is going down. Your metabolism is slowing down. Your metabolism is slowing down because your body temperature is going down. But with Fastercise, your body temperature doesn't go down. Your body temperature either maintains or maybe goes a little bit higher. So you're using Fastercise to maintain or increase your body temperature, to maintain your metabolic rate, to increase your metabolic rate. So imagine this, like everybody knows that when you starve, you might lose fat, you might burn fat, but you also slow your metabolism. Well, how about this? How about burning fat without slowing your metabolism and without being hungry? So it turns out you can burn fat without being hungry and without slowing your metabolism. And so Allison and I often talk about it. It's like burning your body fat down like the wax in a candle. Like you're just burning off your storage. And like she says, it's like melting. And the thing that's so cool about it too is that it's unimaginable that it won't work. I mean, it has to work because that's the way the body works. I mean, what causes fat to go away? Cortisol, glucagon, epinephrine, growth hormone, and what causes that? Fastercise, windedness, lactate, and fasting does that, and freezing, being cold does that. Anyway, you don't have to be cold to shiver, and you don't have to be hungry to lose it. You don't have to be hungry to burn fat, and you don't have to feel hungry to burn fat. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, and you don't have to go like, I got to eat every 2 hours, like being a slave to the kitchen and the refrigerator, right? So I want to go back to, the shivering piece, right? And there's this cold therapy is just such a big deal these days. Everybody's like talking about it. Is that part of the benefits that we see with that? Is the shivering, and then the shivering increasing mitochondrial biosynthesis?
Is what part of it?
So this press that cold plunges are getting, right, is because you're going into the cold plunge and you're shivering, and they're saying, stay in there longer so you shiver more. Is that, what's happening there? Are they increasing mitochondrial biosynthesis and improving T3 uptake in the mitochondria?
I would say so. I would say that's a really big thing because, of course, when you go in that cold water, like the reason why you start to shiver is because, and like when you go in that cold water, it's like your body is saying, oh my gosh, we're losing calories here. We're losing a lot of calories. We've got to mobilize our fat. We've got to mobilize our glycogen. And so there's 4 hormones that go up when that happens. And they're the same 4 hormones that go up when you're fasting. And they're the same 4 hormones that go up when you Fastercise. They're the counter-regulatory hormones to insulin. So those are 3 different ways to accomplish the same thing. And so, but the thing is, I guess the difference is like, yeah, if you get in that cold water, you're going to get a signal to your body that you're losing calories, and then you're going to be having to mobilize some stuff, and your temperature is going to be dropping, and eventually you're going to start to shiver, to help maintain your body temperature, to help maintain your metabolic rate. Well, that's true. That's one way of doing it. The other way is you can preemptively shiver. Like it's so cool because you don't, so like Fastercise is a preemptive thing that you can do instead of freezing, or in addition to freezing. Let's say, like I myself actually, like, I have a cold plunge, and I go in there myself, but I don't have to go in there, but like, I like to go in there. I don't think it's anyway, so what I like to do is, like if I Fastercise, if I warm up my metabolic rate before I go into the cold plunge, I can tolerate the cold plunge a lot better. And sometimes I Fastercise while I'm in the cold plunge. So rather than letting myself get so cold to the point that I start to shiver, I shiver before I have to shiver. Like I shiver before I get so uncomfortable or get so frozen that I have to shiver autonomically or automatically. I preemptively do it voluntarily to keep myself comfortable before I get to that uncomfortable point. See, like you don't have to be cold to shiver. You can preemptively shiver. And same thing is, it's like when you're done with a cold plunge, Yeah, when I'm done with the cold plunge, I shiver. Even if I'm not shivering, I shiver preemptively just to warm myself up. Just to warm myself up. And sometimes I won't even dry off with a towel. Sometimes I'll even go under a fan. And instead of talk about losing calories, you've got evaporative cooling. You just come out of a freezing thing and you've got evaporative cooling, but you can overcome all of that with Fastercise. You can overcome all of that with shivering. Talk about some calorie dumps. Talk about moving off some calorie. So it's pretty cool.
This is very cool. So what's the best way for our practitioners who are listening and our whoever to do it for themselves, but also so that they can learn how to, and they can get their patients and their clients doing it? What are our best learning tools? Like for me, I've seen you talk about it. I've seen you do it, Allison, but I try and I go, oh, I'm not doing it right. And I give up. Right. So what's the best way for us to get proficient at it? And also what's the best scheduling of it to incorporate it into it? Where do we fit those 5 minutes a day?
Well, that's a great question, and that's a great question. And basically, you can look up Fastercise. We're on most of our social media platforms, just Fastercise. But if you do want to get proficient at it and you do want help incorporating this in your schedule, I highly recommend the Fastercise app. It's available on Apple and Google Play. That is something we've worked very hard to be able to incorporate into the busiest of schedules and also accommodate for health limitations. Like if you have an injury on your ankle, if you have an injury on your back, we can accommodate for those and give you a schedule that will work for you. And so that's something we have given. Rita Marie has a discount for Fastercise. And so she's going to be sharing that link, 40% off. And then I know we've also had some doctors who would like to become like Fastercise partners for their patients. So in that case, they can reach out to me at Allison@fastercise.com, ALLISON@FASTERCISE.com. And we can help them set up a program that they can give to their patients specifically. But yeah, those are the tools that we worked in place. We're working really hard to make Fastercise something that can benefit people wherever they are in their fitness and health journey. And that's why we have some demonstrations on social media, because maybe people just want a little taste. Maybe they just want to see a little bit, or maybe they want something a little bit more in depth, something that's going to help them really change their health. And so those are the different options that we have available.
Okay. Do you have the bodybuilding Fastercise program? That's the one I want. I want to do that one. I'm here doing half an hour a day of heavy weightlifting. I want to, have a little bit, maybe less of that. I'll still do it, but maybe less of that, and I can do more of the other.
I can hook you up. And I have not put in a bodybuilding regime in the platform yet, but now that I know that there's demand for it, I'll put one together.
All right. I'll hook you up with some of my trainer friends, and they may help. They may have people who want to get in there. Okay.
Yeah.
So this has been amazing. We've been talking with Dr. Dennis Wilson, his daughter Allison, and we're talking about we started talking about thyroid and metabolic health and the effect on mitochondria and how there's T3 receptors on the mitochondria and the kind of downfalls of the conventional medical approach to treating thyroid, and how Fastercise can help with restoring thyroid function, not necessarily restoring the thyroid gland. If it's damaged, hurt, injured, you've got other more in-depth things to do with that, as well as in Fastercise. But really, what we're looking at is the uptake into the cells and how the thyroid hormone works inside the cells. And wow, if you can do this in 5 minutes a day, if you can teach your patients and teach your clients how to do this in 5 minutes a day to help restore their thyroid function, right? Because not everybody is going to benefit from T4 therapy. Not everybody's going to benefit from T3 therapy. Not every practitioner has a license to prescribe any of that. And why not do it from a natural body function perspective? Nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress management, toxin avoidance, etc. So I'm thrilled. Thank you so much for being here. Any last parting words you want to add for folks?
Yeah, I'd like to, a couple of things, but the one thing haven't mentioned yet is that turns out Fastercise or high intensity exercise actually increases T3 production. So I mean, that's not shouldn't be too surprising, but it's like the body is saying, like you're doing that kind of intense exercise, the body is saying, wow, we're not going for this low metabolism storage approach. We're going to change gears from storage mode into forage mode. We're going with the high productivity foraging kind of strategy. So we're going to need a faster metabolism. So we're going to need more T3. So your T3 production goes up. And so that could be one of the shifts there. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. There's so much more we could talk about, but
we'll have to have you back another time and we'll talk about this so much more, because there is, and when we're working with people with thyroid problems, it's not like it's just every other person that comes in every 3-4 months. We're seeing this all. I don't know about you, but I'm seeing it all the time. And people are already on medication. Some of them are not getting results. Some of them don't like being on the medication. Some of them get side effects. Some are concerned about their TSH being practically zero. And it's not the best necessarily approach. So we're really seeing it a lot. Back in the day when I was in school, they were saying, yeah, thyroid, you're not going to see it that often. And you can even read that in the textbook of medicine. I think it was Robin's textbook of medicine. Oh yeah, this is something you won't see that often. We see it every day. We see it all the time. I know you guys have seen it. You see those people who can't lose weight in spite of starving themselves. You see those people who are cold all the time and everybody else is warm. And we've got to have something for them.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening in. You've been listening to the Reinvent Healthcare podcast. You guys have the power within to help people in places that other people are not helping, other practitioners aren't. When you use the power of functional nutrition, diet, lifestyle approaches, supplements, and herbs as needed, you have the power to change people's lives and give them back their lives. So if you want to download our thyroid handout, free handout, Dr. Rita, no, it's actually at, let me start that part again. If you want to download the free guide we put together to optimizing thyroid function, go to reinventhealthcare.com/thyroid and enjoy that and continue to listen to the podcast. Put a good review in for us. And until next time, shine on.